this is not something like very few people can do. A lot of people can actually do that, and 15 years old with enough computer knowledge can also do that.
Conversation with a hacker, an interview between Greg and Lewis about privacy, security, and other mysteries. No bullshit.
Okay. All right. So yeah, passwords. So passwords, they're used everywhere. We use it all the time to connect to our account, to our Facebook, to our Google, and basically that's the only thing that prevents somebody from accessing your information. So if someone gets your password, is going to be able to do everything you can do and access everything you can access, emails, message, nude pictures you send to your girlfriend. We can go a step further. We can access information about your social security information, about your bank account. But yeah, it's the same concept. Basically, it's just a password that's there to protect you.
But who can find out about my password?
In general, in security, you got two kinds of attack. You got the mass targeted attack and you got the personal targeted attack. So the mass targeted attack are more like, I'm looking for somebody who has this kind of security flaw. It doesn't really matter who. It's just I'm exploiting a lot of people to check if one of them has nice information. And the targeted attack is, I'm coming after you personally. So even if you don't have flaws, I'm going to find a technique that allows me to get the information I want, in this case, the password. So mass targeted attacks in passwords are made by stealing databases from company. For example, you use Dropbox. So Dropbox has your password in their databases. So a hacker hacks Dropbox, takes the entire databases, and he can have access to all the users' passwords. And what happened in general, people use the same password everywhere. So your password from Dropbox going to be your password from Google and your password from other places. So what they do is they just extract the passwords and try them in different other accounts, especially the email, because in general, your login is your email. So I know that the password is highly probable to be the same in your email account. So that's why that's how you take control of accounts.
What's the best way for me to store passwords? Like, how should I store them? Should I store them online? A lot of people use password managers. Should I write it down? But that means it's not on the cloud. What should I do?
Okay. All right. So there is a very misconception because password managers are not something I recommend to people, because if I target you personally and I hack you and I take control over your devices, I'm gonna see you have a password manager. So I'm gonna wait and do nothing until you unlock your password manager, and that's going to give me access to all of your accounts and all of your passwords. So for me, hacker point of view, this is a gold mine of information, because you saved me like weeks of work to find out where are your accounts and everything. Everything is listed there. So this is my login, this is my password, and this is where you can log into my account. So yeah, it's really bad to have this kind of thing.
That's what you just mentioned is assuming that you already have access to my device and you're already inside my device.
Yes, but that's not quite complicated to do. For example, if you take smartphones today, so you got two kinds, you got Android and iPhone. That's merely the main thing there is. Android, there is so much different versions and everything that 50% of them have security flaws that are publicly available. What it means is I can go on a website, download a numerical weapon, tell the numerical weapon, this is the phone I want to hack, press play, and I'm in your phone. This is not something very few people can do. A lot of people can actually do that, and 15 years old with enough computer knowledge can also do that. So yeah, 50% of Androids. That's quite a lot.
Quite insane. Assuming that it's relatively easy for someone of a high level to hack into your phone, what you're basically saying is that once you hack into this phone, then if I have a password manager on my phone, it's actually a gold mine for you, because it gives you a database of all the passwords there.
Yes, and depending on which password manager you use, it's going to get to be easier or not to access it. If the password manager is not that safe, for example, you have a list in your notes, I can just access it directly. If, for example, it's something that's encrypted and blocked and everything, so I need a password for you to unlock it, I'm just going to wait and do nothing, so I'm not detected, and until you unlock it. And since you use a password manager, it means that you use it a lot, so you're going to unlock it quite fast. And once it's unlocked, I can access everything.
I've been using a password manager. I don't actually put the real password in it. I just put clues. So how would it be helpful for you, and how would it be easy for you?
If you use a password manager, it's better to have clues than to have the real passwords. But even, for example, the problem with the password manager is if there is if you have one, it's still going to list all of your accounts. So even if you have clues, it's going to be harder for me to access your password, but it depends what I want. For example, if you connect once or twice per month or per year to an account, if it's not listed, I cannot know it. But if it's listed and I know that this account has good information, I'm going to plan and wait for you to connect to get the password anyway. So it's from my point of view, it's always better not to use a password manager. In the order of the safest to the least safe, the first thing I tell people is to have one password for each account. So you protect yourself from mass targeted attack like stolen databases, and to memorize them. Of course, this is quite complex. This is what I personally do. So all my passwords are complex and memorized, so you cannot access them anywhere. If you cannot do that, the second best thing I tell people is to write them down on a piece of paper. Why? Because this is offline. So accessing something offline is really, really hard compared to accessing something that is connected to internet. If you keep it on your wallet, which is always on you, somebody has to access it physically. And you can add an extra layer of security, which is have like three characters, the same for all your passwords, and add them at the beginning or at the end of the passwords that I've written on the list. And don't write it down. So basically, you write down your password for all of your accounts in the piece of paper, and then you add three more characters, letters or numbers, but you don't write them down. So it's the same for all of your passwords. You can put them at the beginning or at the end. So when you log into your accounts, you put these three that are in memories, and then you put the rest that is written down in the paper. What it means is if somebody stores a piece of paper, is not going to know that there is three missing characters, so he's going to enter the password and it's not going to work. If he tries to figure it out, it's going to be your account is going to be locked after 3 or 4 attempts. So it's quite safe, and even with a piece of paper, you will not be able to connect to your accounts.
Okay.
And if somebody hacks your devices, he's not going to get access to the list, which is quite important.
Okay, but would you recommend? Because obviously, if I just have a written list, I would be super scared if I left it in my wallet. It's still some would say it's still quite common to get your wallet stolen. Would you say it would be reasonable to have a written copy somewhere?
Yes, you can have a written copy somewhere safe in your home or in a safe in a bank or wherever you want.
But so you were talking about how, like, using a password manager, you may become vulnerable if someone actually targets you, if a hacker targets you. But how about if someone actually hacks directly into the database of these password manager companies? Are they secure, or does it depend on the service?
Okay, so that depends on the password manager. Some password manager have end-to-end encryption, have quite a good security. Others don't. It depends.
One thing I was wondering as well is when you use these companies, let's assume they're very secure. Do they actually have access to my password? Can they see my password?
Okay, so it depends on the company. So depending on the company, password managers or not, in general, password managers, they try not to have access to your password because it will be quite problematic. But in general, how passwords are stored in company like Dropbox or Google, they store a more safe way. It's a kind of encryption, so they cannot really read the password. But however, there is also techniques to break this kind of encryption. That's what happened when they stole the database. they apply a decryption technique to get the password. So one rule about passwords is what misconception about password is: the more complex, the better, which is not. Unless your password is more than 12 characters, the best kind of encryption is not going to protect you because it's been broken. So when you get a stolen database, you can extract in a couple of seconds every password that's under 12 characters. Even if it's alphanumerical and characters and very complex, it's going to take a couple of seconds. So that's why if you want a safe password, make it a passphrase. It can be simple, but a passphrase is better than a complex, shorter characters.
Okay. Going back to the Facebook and Google example, so you said that they use a type of encryption to store your passwords, but I guess a lot of people are interested in knowing how concretely are these passwords stored, and in what way are they visible to the company, and how do you know if the company has access to your password in the sense that they can read your password?
You cannot. So that depends on how the company implements security. Some company care about security and they do it well. Some company care and they don't do it well. And some company just doesn't care and they put it in clear. So everybody, in this case, everybody who connects into the database or stores the database can read your password out loud without any problems. So that depends. Some company publish white papers saying how they handle security, but that's quite rare. So in general, you will not be able to know how they store your password. That's why it's a good idea to have one password per account. So even if it's stored very badly and the database gets stolen or somebody from the company access your password, you will not be able to do anything with it because it's only for one account.
Okay, yeah. So you would definitely recommend to have one different password for each account, even if you use 30, 40 different accounts, always have a different password.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, personal targeted attacks. So I'm coming after you personally. So I hack your devices, I take control over them. I look around what you do. If I see a password manager, I'm going to try to unlock it to get access, etc. But there is another spectrum of attacks. So that's stolen databases. So basically what they do is they hack companies, they store the databases, and they try to extract your password. And with that, they try to connect to others of your accounts with the passwords they store. You have a website that's quite interesting. We will put a link in the description of the video, which recompile all the stolen databases that hangs around in the internet. And so you can enter your password or enter your email, and they show you, okay, you got 5 passwords that has been broken, and it's around in the internet, so you should change these passwords. It's a quite good web page if you want to check if one of your passwords has been stolen.
Perfect. Okay. So when you have like a mass targeted attack, so for example, someone trying to steal a huge database of different passwords. Take the example of a data breach on Dropbox or a potential one on Google or whatever. So there's 2 levels for the hacker though. Like once they've stolen the database, they still need to break into the encryption, right?
Yes. That's why having a long password protects you from the decryption techniques. If you have a short password under 12 characters, whatever is it, it's been broken. Even if it's simple, that prevents you from having your password extracted in this kind of condition.
But when you mean, can you elaborate a bit more on the extraction of password under 12 characters? Why is it that under 12 characters it's so easy to extract?
Because basically it's a special kind of encryption. I'm not going to go into technical details, but what people did is they generated all possible passwords until 12 characters, and they generated the encrypted password. So basically what they do is they have a very big databases with all the version of the passwords and their encrypted version. So basically I take Dropbox stolen databases, I looked under your email. I see, so this is the encrypted password. I look into my databases. I look for the same information, and then I look for the decrypted password. That's why it takes a couple of seconds, because it's already been done everything. Non-technically speaking, technically it's a little more complex than that, but to make it easier to understand.
Yeah.
So to summarize, first, passwords. The misconception is the more complex, the better. No, the real thing is the longer, the better. Go above 12 characters. And even if it's simple, there is no problem. Use passphrases so you can remember them, and your password will be a lot more protected. The second thing, the second misconception is having your passwords in a password manager. It's less safe than having your password written on a piece of paper in your wallet. So the best way to store your password is always in your memory, and one for each account. If you cannot do that, what I recommend is write them down in a piece of paper and use the 3 characters technique to prevent somebody from stealing your list and using the passwords. And if you cannot do these kind of things, use a password manager with clues, always better than with a real password. Another thing I recommend in complement of your password is to put 2-factor authentication everywhere. So what is it? Basically, it's a third information you will be asked when you log into your account. For example, in general, 2-factor authentication, it's a 6-digit number that change every 30 seconds. And you have an app or device that gives you this number. What is the point of that? It's if somebody stole your passwords, he will not be able to connect to your account without this information, which is really, really useful. There's a lot of different techniques to do 2-factor authentication, but we will talk about it in the next video.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Feel free to subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions, just comment below. Thanks.
Subscribe to the podcast and stay tuned for next week's episode on Conversation with a Hacker.